Hello everybody. So today we are doing another guided reading recording for Anne Frank, Diary of a Young Girl. This is our 5th guided reading, and it is going to be covering pages 151 to 222. So yay, let's dig in. Okay, so this is going to be our reading focus today. Today we will be focusing on the nature motif that reveals Anne's personality in her writing, and transitioning from a young girl to a teenager, Anne's growing frustration with her parents, Anne's relationship with Peter, and Anne's reaction to politics and the realities of hiding. So you want to make sure you have your checkpoint opened in the course so you are ready to complete that as we go through. But first, let's start with some vocabulary. So this is impasse, despondent, magnanimous, sages. Impasse. Noun. A situation in which no progress is possible, especially because of a disagreement, a deadlock. The war is at an impasse. Spirits are low. This is on page 153. This is where it's used in her diary, meaning nothing's really going on with the war. No progress has been shown. Despondent. In low spirits from loss of hope or courage. This left me on my own to face the difficult task of improving myself, so I wouldn't have to hear their reproaches, because they made me feel so despondent. Sage. Noun. A profoundly wise man, especially one who features in ancient history or legend. And no one, especially the idiotic sages around here, is capable of understanding us. So you can tell here she's using sages a little bit sarcastically, right? Calling these sages, the adults, idiotic sages. Magnanimous. Adjective. Very generous or forgiving, especially toward a rival or someone less powerful than oneself. I would never have refused anyone who wanted to peek at my answers. I was magnanimous with my candy, and I wasn't stuck up. Meaning she's very generous with her candy. She would give it to everybody. So let's dig into some of her diary entries, and we're going to focus our reading afterwards. So just focus on listening now. Wednesday, February 23rd, 1944. My dearest Kitty, the weather's been wonderful since yesterday, and I've perked up quite a bit. My writing, the best thing I have, is coming along well. I go to the attic almost every morning to get the stale air out of my lungs. This morning when I went there, Peter was busy cleaning up. He finished quickly and came over to where I was sitting on my favorite spot on the floor. The two of us looked out at the blue sky, the bare chestnut tree glistening with dew, the seagulls and other birds glinting with silver as they swooped through the air, and we were so moved and entranced that we couldn't speak. He stood with his head against a thick beam while I sat. We breathed in the air, looked outside, and both felt that the spell shouldn't be broken with words. We remained like this for a long while, and by the time he had to go to the loft to chop wood, I knew he was a good, decent boy. He climbed the ladder to the loft, and I followed. During the 15 minutes he was chopping wood, we didn't say a word either. I watched him from where I was standing and could see he was obviously doing his best to chop the right way and show off his strength. But I also looked out the open window, letting my eyes roam over a large part of Amsterdam, over the rooftops and on to the horizon, a strip of blue so pale it was almost invisible. As long as this exists, I thought, this sunshine and this cloudless sky, and as long as I can enjoy it, how can I be sad? The best remedy for those who are frightened, lonely, or unhappy is to go outside, somewhere they can be alone. Alone with the sky, nature, and God. For then, and only then, can you feel that everything is as it should be, and that God wants people to be happy amid nature's beauty and simplicity. As long as this exists, and that should be forever, I know that there will be solace for every sorrow, whatever the circumstances. I firmly believe that nature can bring comfort to all those who suffer. Oh, who knows, perhaps it won't be long before I can share this overwhelming feeling of happiness with someone who feels the same as I do. Yours, Anne. P.S. Thoughts to Peter. We've been missing out on so much here, so very much, for such a long time, and I miss it just as much as you do. I'm not talking about external things, since we're well provided for in that sense. I mean the internal things. Like you, I long for freedom from freedom and fresh air, but I think we've been amply compensated for their loss. On the inside, I mean. This morning, when I was sitting in front of the window and taking a long, deep look outside at God and nature, I was happy, just plain happy. Peter, as long as people feel that kind of happiness within themselves, the joy of nature, health, and much more besides, they'll always be able to recapture that happiness. Riches, prestige, everything can be lost, but the happiness in your own heart can only be dimmed. It will always be there as long as you live to make you happy again. Whenever you're feeling lonely or sad, try going to the loft on a beautiful day and looking outside, not at the houses and at the rooftops, but at the sky. As long as you can look fearlessly at the sky, you know that you're pure within and will find happiness once more. So, let's talk about how nature, the motif nature, is present through her writing here. We know that Anne uses nature to reveal her personality to her audience. Descriptions of nature reflect her internal state of being. So when she notices the beauty and simplicity in nature, she shows her resilience to hardship, her optimism. Conversely, when descriptions of nature are dark and kind of gloomy, it reflects how she feels confined and oppressed. We can tell that nature serves as a great comfort to Anne while she remains in hiding. Let's take a closer look at this passage and see where she specifically is reflecting on nature. So she says, the best remedy for those who are frightened, lonely, or happy is to go outside, somewhere they can be alone with the sky, nature, and God. For then, and only then, can you feel that everything is as it should be, and that God wants people to be happy amid nature's beauty and simplicity. So we see she's looking at life in a very positive way. This overall entry was rather positive, right? She's observing the beauty in nature. She's talking about happiness, this overwhelming feeling of happiness, right? And we see it too on the last little part of the journal entry. Here we go, the joy of nature, right? Whenever you're feeling lonely or sad, try going to the loft on a beautiful day and looking outside. Not at the houses or the rooftops, but at the sky. As long as you can look fearlessly at the sky, you'll know that you're pure within and will find happiness once more. So she's saying, look, if you're unhappy, go outside and you know what? I think you'll be able to recapture that happiness. So she's showing us her optimistic side through that use of the nature motif. So, checkpoint question 1. What does Anne mean when she says, like you, I long for freedom and fresh air, but I think we've been amply compensated for their loss? On the inside, I mean. A, despite being confined, she can still see the beauty of nature outside. B, she doesn't miss being outside at all. C, she longs to be outside and doesn't see any positives to being confined in the annex. Please pause the recording and complete question 1 in the checkpoint. Next entry. Tuesday, March 7th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, in spite of everything, I wasn't altogether happy in 1942. I often felt I'd been deserted, but because I was on the go all day long, I didn't think about it. I enjoyed myself as much as I could, trying consciously or unconsciously to fill the void with jokes. Looking back, I realize that this period of my life has irrevocably come to a close. My happy-go-lucky, carefree schoolgirl days are gone forever. I don't even miss them. I've outgrown them. I can no longer kid around since my serious side is always here. I see my life up to New Year's 1944 as if I were looking through a powerful magnifying glass. When I was at home, my life was filled with sunshine. Then in the middle of 1942, everything changed overnight. The quarrels, the accusations. I couldn't take it all in. I was caught off guard, and the only way I knew to keep my bearings was to talk back. The first half of 1943 brought crying spells, loneliness, and the gradual realization of my faults and shortcomings, which were numerous and seemed even more so. I filled the day with chatter, tried to draw Pim closer to me, and failed. This left me on my own to face the difficult task of improving myself so I wouldn't have to hear their reproaches, because they made me so despondent. And we see our vocab word coming into play. The second half of the year was slightly better. I became a teenager and was treated more like a grown-up. I began to think about things and write stories, finally coming to the conclusion that the others no longer had anything to do with me. They had no right to swing me back and forth like a pendulum on a clock. I wanted to change myself in my own way. I realized I could manage without my mother completely and totally, and that hurt. But what affected me even more was the realization that I was never going to be able to confide in Father. I didn't trust anyone but myself. After New Year's, the second big change occurred, my dream, through which I discovered my longing for a boy. Not for a girlfriend, but for a boyfriend. I also discovered an inner happiness underneath my superficial and cheerful exterior. From time to time I was quiet. Now I live only for Peter, since what happens to me in the future depends largely on him. I lie in bed at night after ending my prayers with the words, Ich danke dir für all das Gut und Liebe und Schön, and I'm filled with joy. I think of going into hiding my health and my whole being as das Gut, Peter's love, which is still so new and fragile, and which neither of us dares to say out loud, the future, happiness and love, as das Liebe, the world, nature, the tremendous beauty of everything, and all that splendor, as das Schön. At moments, I don't think about all the misery, but about the beauty that still remains. This is where Mother and I differ greatly. Her advice in the face of melancholy is, think about all the suffering in the world and be thankful you're not part of it. My advice is, go outside to the country, enjoy the sun and all nature has to offer. Go outside and try to capture the happiness within yourself. Think of all the beauty in yourself and in everything around you and be happy. I don't think Mother's advice can be right, because what are you supposed to do if you became part of the suffering? You'd be completely lost. On the contrary, beauty remains, even in misfortune. Even if you look for it, you discover more and more happiness and regain your balance. A person who's happy will make others happy. A person who has courage and faith will never die in misery. Yours, Anne M. Frank. I also want to note that she never signed her journal entries with her middle name before, right? Anne M. Frank. So this is showing you, even just through her writing, a tiny little tidbit of how she's starting to kind of view herself as more of an adult, right? Anne is growing up. So Anne reflects on how she has changed over the course of hiding, transitioning from a carefree schoolgirl to a teenager. She is aware of her faults and becomes more judgmental of herself. She realizes her loneliness and longs for a serious boyfriend. She feels as though she cannot trust her father or mother, and she longs for someone to trust. So we see here, guys, through this, Anne's really self-aware, and to be self-aware, it requires you to, be really, think deeply about yourself. And you don't really do that until you start to grow up. You start to transition from a young boy or girl to a teenager, right? And we notice that Anne's optimistic advice to herself versus her mom's rather kind of pessimistic, I guess we could say, advice. Anne's advice is to go outside to the country, enjoy nature, enjoy yourself, think of the beauty in yourself, whereas her mother's advice is to think about all the suffering in the world and be thankful that that's not you. So, with that, let's start checkpoint 2. What is Anne's advice for dealing with hardship? Anne believes that one should think about other people in the world who have it worse. Anne believes that one should not think about hardship. Anne believes that one should go out in nature and seek happiness. Please pause the recording and complete question number 2 in the checkpoint. Friday, March 17th, 1944. My dearest darling, everything turned out all right after all. Beth just had a sore throat, not the flu, and Mr. Kugler got medical certificate to excuse him from the work detail. The entire annex breathed a huge sigh of relief. Everything's fine here except that Margot and I are rather tired of our parents. Don't get me wrong, I still love Father just as much as ever, and Margot loves both Father and Mother. But when you're as old as we are, you want to make a few decisions for yourself. Get out from under their thumb. Whenever I go upstairs, they ask what I'm going to do. They won't let me salt my food. Mother asks me every evening at 8:15 if it isn't time for me to change into my nightie, and they have to approve every book I read. I must admit they are not strict at all about that and let me read nearly everything, but Margot and I are sick and tired of having to listen to their comments and questions all day long. There's something else that displeases them. I no longer feel like giving them little kisses morning, noon, and night. All those cute nicknames seem so affected, and Father's fondness for talking about farting and going to the bathroom is disgusting. In short, I'd like nothing better than to do without their company for a while. And they don't understand that. Not that Margot and I have ever said any of this to them. What would be the point? They wouldn't understand anyway. Margot said last night, what really bothers me is that if you happen to put your head in your hands and sigh once or twice, they immediately ask you whether you have a headache or don't feel well. For both of us, it's been quite a blow to suddenly realize that the very little remains of the close and harmonious family we used to be at home. This is mostly because everything's out of kilter here. By that I mean we're treated like children when it comes to external matters, while inwardly we're much older than girls our age. Even though I'm only 14, I know what I want. I know who's right and who's wrong. I have my own opinions, ideas, and principles. And though it may sound odd coming from a teenager, I'm feeling more of a person than a child. I feel I'm completely independent of others. I know I'm better at debating or carrying on a discussion than Mother. I know I'm more objective. I don't exaggerate as much. I'm much tidier and better with my hands. Because of that, I feel, this may make you laugh, that I'm superior to her in many ways. To love someone, I have to admire and respect the person, but I feel neither respect nor admiration for Mother. Everything would be all right if only I had Peter, since I admire him in many ways. He's so decent and clever. Yours, Anne and Frank. So family matters. We see that Anne is growing tired of her parents watching her every move. Why might that be? Well, because we previously talked about she's growing up, and when you become a teenager, you start to kind of question everything your parents question about you, right? She notices that she's treated like a child outwardly, despite feeling like she is mature internally. She tells herself that she is, independent of others, much like teenagers typically feel. She and Margot share a sisterly bond separate from the others. So whereas her and Margaret maybe were not as close before, they can at least bond over this, right? They can bond over their mutual dissatisfaction over their parents kind of keeping them under their thumb. And the dramatic realization to her that her family dynamic has shifted. They're not, the close, tight-knit family that she initially thought. I want you guys to pause for a moment and ask yourselves, have you ever felt like this in your life, where you notice that maybe as you grew older, what you thought about your family was maybe not necessarily the truth? You started to kind of seek a little bit more independence out. I'm sure we can all relate to Anne in that time. Checkpoint question number 3. How is Anne's relationship with her family changing? She no longer feels like being affectionate towards her parents, and she becomes closer to Margot. She feels as though she's becoming closer to her parents in hiding, but she still doesn't care for Margot. She realizes she doesn't want to be close to anyone in her family. Please pause the recording and complete checkpoint number 3. Question number 3 in the checkpoint, rather. Tuesday, March 28th, 1944. My dearest Kitty, as much as I'd like to write more on politics, I have lots of other news to report today. First, Mother has virtually forbidden me to go up to Peter since, according to her, Mrs. Van Daan is jealous. Second, Peter invited Margot to join us upstairs. Whether he really means it or is just saying it out of politeness, I don't know. Third, I asked Father if he thought I should take any notice of Mrs. Van Daan's jealousy, and he said I didn't have to. What should I do now? Mother's angry, doesn't want me going upstairs, wants me to go back to doing my homework in the room I share with Dussel. She may be jealous herself. Father doesn't begrudge us those few hours and thinks it's nice we get along so well. Margot likes Peter too, but feels that 3 people can't talk about the same things as 2. Furthermore, Mother thinks Peter's in love with me. To tell you the truth, I wish he were. Then we'd be even, and it'd be a lot easier to get to know each other. She also claims he's always looking at me. Well, I suppose we do give each other occasional wink, but I can't help it if he keeps admiring my dimples, can I? I'm in a very difficult position. Mother's against me, and I'm against her. Father turns a blind eye to the silent struggle between Mother and me. Mother is sad because she still loves me, but I'm not at all unhappy because she no longer means anything to me. As for Peter, I don't want to give him up. He's so sweet and I admire him so much. He and I could have a really beautiful relationship, so why are the old folks poking their noses into our business again? Fortunately, I'm used to hiding my feelings, so I managed not to show how crazy I am about him. Is he ever going to say anything? Am I ever going to feel his cheek against mine the way I felt for Patel's cheek in my dream? Oh, Peter and Patel, you're one and the same. They don't understand us. They'd never understand us, that we're just content to just sit beside each other and not say a word. They have no idea what draws us together. Oh, when will we overcome all these difficulties? And yet it's good that we have to surmount them, since it makes the end that much more beautiful. When he lays his head on his arms and closes his eyes, he's still a child. When he plays with Mushi or talks about her, he's loving. When he carries the potatoes or other heavy loads, he's strong. When he goes to watch the gunfire or walks through the dark house to look for burglars, he's brave. And when he's so awkward or clumsy, he's hopelessly endearing. It's much nicer when he explains something to me than when I have to teach him. I wish he were superior to me in nearly every way. What do we care about our 2 mothers? Oh, if only he'd say something. Father always says I'm conceited, but I'm not. I'm merely vain. I haven't had many people tell me that I was pretty, except for a boy at school who said I looked so cute when I smiled. Yesterday, Peter paid me a true compliment, and just for fun, I'll give you a rough idea of our conversation. Peter often says, smile. I thought it was strange, so yesterday I asked him, why do you always want me to smile? Because you get dimples in your cheeks. How do you do that? I was born with them. There's also one in my chin. It's the only mark of beauty I possess. No, that's not true. Yes, it is. I know I'm not beautiful. I never have been, and I never will be. I don't agree. I think you're pretty. I am not. I say you are, and you ought to take my word for it. So, of course, I then said the same about him. Yours, Anne M. Frank. Peter and Anne. So Anne and Peter grow closer, and they begin to open up to one another. Anne feels as though she can trust Peter, which serves as a great comfort and distraction to her while she's in hiding. They both are growing annoyed with the adults in the annex. Anne and Peter talk about things that they cannot share with others, which prompts them to get so close because, as Anne has expressed to us many times in her diary, she longs for someone she can be close to and have an internal kind of connection with. Other members of the annex express jealousy over their connection. Margot is not necessarily jealous of the fact that they're, developing a romance, but she longs for someone who she can tell everything to as well. And Edith Frank, Anne's mom, tells Anne that her closeness with Peter is making Peter's mom a little bit jealous. And this, plays on Anne where she thinks, oh, do I want to keep going to Peter and hanging out with him, or is that only going to make it worse? So we see that their relationship is developing under the very watchful eyes of the other members of the annex. So of course they're going to have comments, and they're going to prey upon that for Anne, and it's going to make her embarrassed. Just like if you guys have ever had a boyfriend or girlfriend or had a crush on somebody growing up and you brought them home, I'm sure that was a big thing. And this is kind of similar to that, except the families all close. The families are watching their relationship kind of blossom. That's rather different. Whereas you might introduce your boyfriend or girlfriend to your parents or guardians by having them over for maybe like a dinner or something. This is different, right? So they're developing a really unique connection here, and the more the other members of the annex kind of joke about it and pry into their business, the closer they become. So this is huge for Anne. You'll see, since their life is kind of so physically confined, this starts to take up Anne's life, her whole kind of being. She starts writing about Peter profusely. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't start out entirely as a romance. Like, it's a friendship that, builds trust. And now, she starts to say, I only live for Peter. So she really, feels connected to him. And that's an important aspect of her life in hiding, right? Because now she's not so focused on, oh, what's going on? I'm in hiding. She's now focused. Her attention is diverted to Peter, right? And making sure she's, appealing to him. Checkpoint question number 4. How has Anne's relationship with Peter changed? She wants to marry Peter. Anne feels as though she can trust Peter and develops romantic feelings for him. She feels like Peter is a good friend, but is not romantically interested in him. You can pause this checkpoint. Pause the recording and complete question number 4 in the checkpoint. Thursday, April 6, 1944. Dearest Kitty, we have been strongly reminded of the fact that we're Jews in chains, chained to one spot without any rights, but with 1,000 obligations. We must put our feelings aside. We must be brave and strong, bear discomfort without complaint, do whatever is in our power and trust in God. One day this terrible war will be over, and the time will come when we'll be people again and not just Jews. Who has inflicted this on us? Who has set us apart from all the rest? Who has put us through such suffering? It is God who made us the way we are, but it's also God who will lift us up again. In the eyes of the world, we're doomed, but if after all this suffering there are still Jews left, the Jewish people will be held up as an example. Who knows, maybe our religion will teach the world and all the people in it about goodness, and that's the reason, the only reason we have to suffer. We can never be just Dutch or just English or whatever. We will always be Jews as well. And we'll have to keep on being Jews, but then we'll want to be. Be brave. Let's remember our duty and perform it without complaint. There will be a way out. God has never deserted our people. Through the ages, Jews have had to suffer, but through the ages, they've gone on living, and the centuries of suffering have only made them stronger. The weak shall fall, and the strong shall survive and not be defeated. That night, I really thought I was going to die. I waited for the police, and I was ready for death, like a soldier on a beautiful battlefield. I'd gladly have given my life for my country, but now that I've been spared, my first wish after the war is to become a Dutch citizen. I love the Dutch, I love this country, I love the language, and I want to work here. And even if I have to write to the Queen herself, I won't give up until I've reached my goal. I'm becoming more and more independent of my parents. Young as I am, I face life with more courage and have a better and truer sense of justice than my mother. I know what I want. I have a goal. I have opinions, a religion, and love. If I can only be myself, I'll be satisfied. I know that I'm a woman with inner strength and a great deal of courage. If God lets me live, I'll achieve more than Mother ever did. I'll make my voice heard. I'll go out into the world and work for mankind. I now know that courage and happiness are needed first. Yours, Anne M. Frank. The reality of life in hiding. So I cut that excerpt down because that was a really long diary entry. They had almost gotten caught, as you have read, and you know, it's something that Anne is really affected by. So about her future begins to change as she kind of considers death more seriously. She talks about, that night I really thought I was going to die. I waited for the police and I was ready for death, like a soldier on a battlefield. Great simile here, right? Like a soldier on the battlefield, like she's ready to greet her fate. And her attitude has changed. I'd gladly have given my life for my country. So she's saying at this point, she kind of accepts that if that's the fate, that's how it might be. But she's saying, now that I lived through that, now that I've been spared, I want to have a future for myself. I want to become a Dutch citizen. I want to work here. She starts to envision life for herself after almost getting caught, right? The longer that they're in hiding, the more likely they are to, be discovered. So despite the reality of her situation, Anne remains hopeful that her words will reach others and she will make an impact on the world. So let's go back and look at that again. You'll see this is exactly what she's saying here. She talks about herself as if she is, different than her mom. She kind of looks at her mom as the opposite of justice, right? I know what I want. I have a goal. I have opinions, a religion, and a love. Let's see. Inner strength and a great deal of courage. She's defining herself as this very strong person. If God lets me survive this, I'll achieve more than Mother ever did. I'll make my voice heard. So she truly believes she's going to make an impact on the world. And what's beautiful about this is she actually does. She makes such an impact on society, students, for generations, because of her strength, because of her optimism, while being in such a terrible situation. That's why we study Anne. So checkpoint question number 5. What is Anne's tone in this passage? A, despondent, and I put that in red because it's our vocab word. B, optimistic, or C, frightened. Please pause the recording and complete question 5 in the checkpoint. So we have finished. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you got